Students. My name is Drew Dosey, and I'm the manager of Birth to 5 programming here at DCPS. And I'm so thrilled to be with you here this evening for this special session that is being facilitated by Miranda from the UDC SNAP-Ed program. So as we're getting started tonight, there are just a couple of housekeeping items that I wanted to go over with the group. So obviously we're using Zoom to host tonight's session. And so throughout the session, we invite you to enter your questions into the chat. You can also unmute and engage with us and ask questions at any time if you feel comfortable. We love hearing your voices. We have turned the cameras off for the beginning just because we don't want to catch any embarrassing mishaps, but you're welcome to turn it on during the session if you feel comfortable. And then I also wanted to let everybody know that tonight we will be offering simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. So I'm going to pause for just a moment so that anybody who would like to access the interpretation can do so at this time. As you're joining, if you have any questions about how to access the interpretation after we get started, please let us know in the chat. Octavio, our interpreter, will be happy to help. All right, and that brings us to our community agreements. So we like to start off all of our Ready for Pre-K sessions with some general community agreements for our time together. We're really committed to ensuring that this forum is a place where everyone feels safe and welcome and respected. So we just ask that during the session you be kind, to be patient, and to be open. And with that, I would love to introduce you to Miranda, who is joining us tonight from UDC SNAP-Ed program for this special session on picky eating, which I'm sure that we are all very eager to hear about. So Miranda, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and feel free to start sharing your slides whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Drew. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Miranda Damaris, and I'm the Senior Program Coordinator at UDC SNAP-Ed. Let me share my screen. Okay, and I'm seeing black. Is everyone else seeing the slides yet or no?
Not yet.
Okay.
I saw your screen for just a minute.
Yeah, okay, let's try it again. Sorry, everyone. Okay, one more time.
There we go. Now we can see your screen.
Okay, wonderful.
That's good.
And so to start us off, just wanted to share a little bit about UDC in general. We are part of the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability and Environmental Sciences, otherwise known as CAUSES. And so we have plenty of programs that are out in the community within DC public schools, within DC in general. And so if you're not familiar with our programs, please feel free to check us out. And we at SNAP-Ed are funded by the USDA, so we are an equal opportunity provider. If you ever do experience any discrimination on our calls, we welcome you to file a complaint using the information here on the screen, and we will share this information with you all after as well. But hopefully we don't have any of those problems tonight. So we are going to have our session tonight on positive eating for our picky eaters, which we know is so common with our toddler and preschool age children. So to start us off, we'll look a little bit at UDC SNAP-Ed in general. We'll talk about the My Plate model, facts about children that might actually kind of help us understand some of those picky eating behaviors. We'll look at how to make that eating positive for our picky eaters, and then some tips, followed by our question and answer. So UDC SNAP-Ed, we are a program here that is free for DC residents. Our main target audience is that age group of 2 to 5, and we work with both DC public schools as well as childcare centers throughout the district. Our focus is on obesity prevention, looking at nutrition, food safety, and physical activity. And we not only work with the children themselves, but their caretakers, their families, and of course their teachers as well. We are at a variety of schools within DC Public Schools. And so if your children are entering that school system, there's a chance that they may see us in some of their preschool classes. We do visit our programs on a monthly basis. We provide a nutrition lesson that always has a tasting element. So we're working directly with your kids, helping them become comfortable trying new foods or foods that they think maybe they've tried before and have already decided that they're unfavorable. And so we're constantly working to expose them to new foods and helping them get comfortable actually trying those new foods. And so to open it up to you all, we want to hear from you. To start us off, we've got our My Plate, and we'll look a little bit more in detail in just a minute. But if we look at our 5 food groups: fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy, are there any food groups that you think your children or your child doesn't eat enough of? Sorry, that's the second question. And are there any that you think eat a variety of foods from all 5 food groups? So do you think they get the variety? And if not, which ones do you think they might need more of? And you guys can open it up in the chat or feel free to unmute and answer. I see fruits and vegetables. All right. I do not get a variety of need more vegetables, fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, vegetables definitely seems like a theme. I know it is in my household as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Vegetables, yeah. So this is a common theme. And I did forget to mention, while you all are still typing your answers as well, I have twin 3-year-olds. So I have twin girls. They're 3, so they're right around that same age that we see these these eating behaviors. And one I actually see a lot with my girls is our proteins. So those actual the meats and things like that, certain kinds of meats, the texture isn't always in favor for them. So typically I can get them to eat lots of grains, and they're actually pretty good eaters when it comes to fruits and vegetables. But yeah, the meats can be a bit tricky, and that's okay. That's totally normal. So thank you for sharing. Continue to feel free to type those answers in the chat. But to start us off, I must not have had my Plate page on here. So let's go back before we get into this. The My Plate model here, hopefully it's not new to anyone, but if it is, this has replaced the food pyramid. So here we can see the picture, and it shows those 5 food groups in a way that helps us actually see what those food groups look like on our plate. So these are supposed to be appropriate portion sizes, and it shows us there's a few messages that My Plate likes to share, one of which being that half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables, which can be a challenge, as we saw it with our discussion. Many of you said that fruits and vegetables are a tricky one for our young children. But if you haven't had a chance to check out myplate.gov, and let me see if I can flip over here. Okay. Myplate.gov is a great website, a great resource to use for so many different reasons, for yourself, for your children, for your parents, whoever you want to be healthy in your lives. There's a place for it on My Plate. And so the My Plate here, when we come to the homepage, you can see each of the food groups are separated out here. You can also click right on the image on the plate. And so if you wanted to learn more about any specific food group, you could do that this way. We also have the tab for life stages, and this one is really great because it goes all the way through each of those life stages, from infancy all the way up to older adults. And so, for instance, if we look at toddlers, it'll bring us to a page that gives us, some very pertinent or very important information for that specific age group. And so you can learn more from coming right to this page. There is even an app that can help you create goals and can actually make a plan where you have, those food groups. It will tell you how much you need for your age, your height, your weight, things like that. So it's a great resource. And finally, one of my other favorite parts of My Plate is the My Plate kitchen, where there are tons of great cost-friendly recipes that are healthy, and lots of times they're really easy to make. And the great thing about this is you can kind of filter out what you're looking for. So if you want to look for a specific kind of meal, whether it's a main dish or a side dish, you can do that. If you want to look at dishes for different food groups, you can do that too. And so if you haven't had a chance, feel free to check out My Plate. I believe Drew's going to put that link for you all in the chat. But let's look at some of the things that we know that research has shown about our young children, our toddlers and preschoolers. And so we know that children naturally prefer sweet and slightly salty tastes. And they typically are going to reject those sour or bitter flavors. And so when we think about vegetables, for instance, a lot of times we think vegetables more on the bitter side. Certain fruits, especially like citrus fruits, are more on the sour side. So these are some of those reasons why we see kids may not, be gravitating towards those specific flavors. We also know kids, it takes them a long time to get used to new things, whether it's with food or, other things in their life. And so it can take even up to 20 different exposures of a certain food before a child is actually ready to accept that food as part of their diet. And what this means is keep serving those foods, and we'll keep talking about that throughout the session tonight. But just because they didn't like it the first time doesn't mean that we should never serve it again. And so don't forget, small, quick exposures, doesn't have to be a lot, can be very helpful for your kid as they're learning about new foods in their diet. We also know that kids, that they are just so observant, right? They pick up on every little thing that we do as adults, or maybe what their older siblings are doing. And so if they see within their own family environment, or even at school, if they see a variety of foods, if they see their role models, their peers, their siblings eating a variety of foods, it's going to help them become more comfortable with those foods as well. And so it is, research has shown that kids that are raised with a variety of foods in their environment are more likely to try new foods and eat a variety of foods themselves. Some more things that research has shown with this age group. We know, and a lot of these on this slide, many of us can probably think back to our own childhoods and think how this may have affected us as we were growing up. And so we do know that now those foods that are served on a limited basis, or foods that are kind of deemed as bad or restricted, those are the foods that become highly desirable, right? So, you say candy is bad, you can't ever eat it. Well, what are they going to want? They're going to want candy. And if we even think about this in our own lives, if you've ever tried a restrictive diet, I don't recommend it, but we've probably all gone through some form of that at some point. And so, if you say, I'm going to stop eating bread, well, what's the very first thing you're going to want every day? It's going to be bread. And so, we do know that restricting, whether for children or for adults, restricting access to food can once again make those foods very highly desirable. And maybe not at a preschool age, but as they get older, they're going to find ways to eat those foods if they're never allowed to have them. And then finally, we want to try to, avoid this last one here. We know that coercing or forcing children to eat food, that can have a really long-term negative effect. And so for many of these, this is one I hear a lot of. I know my father-in-law, he talks about this all the time. I was forced to eat Brussels sprouts as a kid, so I'm never eating a Brussels sprout again. But so, those negative experiences, they stick a lot more than the positive ones, or, they'll just remember that negative experience, even if they have a positive experience after that negative one. So we want to try to avoid those, that forcing, so that they don't have that negative response. And so with that, now let's turn it to a positive note. How can we make eating more positive? Well, first off, we want to try to encourage trying food, not liking a food. And so this is something we do when we go into the classrooms. We serve a taste test, and we are very cognizant or understanding that we're not rewarding, or we're not praising the kids that only like the dish. We're not saying, oh, we had a clean plate, so-and-so is part of the clean plate club, he did awesome. Well, that's great. If he liked it and he wanted to finish it, that's great. But the child that tried something for the very first time, that's just as important. Even if that child tried one bite and decided they didn't want to eat anymore, the fact that they tried it is something that we want to encourage and praise as well. So showing that we are, excited about trying and them being able to make their own decisions as far as if they like it or not. We also know that we want to make sure that kids know how to talk about food in a positive way. And so one way that we talk about this in the classrooms is don't yuck my yum. Some of you may have heard of that before, but essentially the way I describe this to the kids is if I think something is yucky or if I think something is yummy and you say that's yucky, well, now I'm gonna immediately think, oh, well, that has to be yucky because my best friend said it was yucky, or it might hurt my feelings. It might have a variety of negative effects that we want to try to avoid when it comes to this, to trying new foods, especially at this age. And so in our classrooms, we really do try to help kids learn how to use positive language when talking about food. So we can say, hey, dirt and worms, that's yucky. But food gives us energy. It helps, nourish our bodies. It helps us grow. That's not yucky. That's yummy. We don't have to like everything. And of course, we don't expect every child to like everything. That's totally normal. But giving them tools how to share that with us in a positive way. So some things that we do, we have a few different sayings that we can say instead of I don't like it. And I want to say this is on the next slide, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So yeah, we'll look at those in just a minute. But we definitely want to make sure that the kids have the tools they need to be able to talk about food in the positive ways. Another way we can do this is by talking about the process that it takes for that food to get to that child's plate. And so something along the lines of compliment the chef. And you can make them part of this process too, right? So they can, they can help you at the grocery store. They can help you create a grocery list. They can help in the kitchen. And so that they see those different steps that it takes for that food to get to their plate, they may be more willing to try it. Or if they see that, mom or dad or whoever is cooking, all of the things they did to get that food to their plate, if they understand that, that may help just a little bit. Obviously, we know that at times our kiddos, they may not listen to that reasoning, and that's okay too. But these are just some little things that you can do to try to change the narrative and make things a little bit more positive when talking about unfavorable foods. As I mentioned earlier, we do want to keep serving those unfavorable foods. It doesn't have to be a lot. And we can also try in a variety of ways, but we know that the more exposure those kids are getting to that same food, the more likely they're going to eventually maybe be willing to try it or be okay with it on their plate. But just continual exposure does help. We do want to try to avoid using food as a reward or a punishment. And this one is really tricky, especially the reward, right? So, let's say kids having a meltdown and you say, okay, well, I'll give you a cookie if you stop crying. Like we've all done it. But that's, we do know that there are some negative effects that can have, especially as children reach adolescent years. And so we want to try to avoid this as much as possible. The easiest way to do this is, think of another reward that isn't related to food, whether that's, a little bit more screen time, which I'm still not huge on, but, there's, it at least is alternative to the food as the reward or punishment. Now, obviously, let's say, you were already planning to serve ice cream at dinner that night, then they're getting ice cream, same thing, regardless of whether they're good or whether they're bad. They're getting ice cream if it was in the plan and that was something they already knew. We don't want to say, well, now you don't get ice cream because you did X, Y, or Z behavior. So that one's really tricky. But the more you practice it, the easier as a parent it does get. So don't get yourself down if you don't do it the first few times and you catch yourself. At least now you know to think about it.
Miranda, that is a great point. And I'm wondering, somebody had entered into the registration questions when they were signing up about using food, not necessarily as a reward, but as part of celebrations. And if you had any tips about how not to associate like junk food with like a celebration, whether that's, a holiday or doing well at school or that sort of thing.
For sure. And that one's so tricky. And my daughter's, I think it's like every other day that I'm like, well, you're bringing candy home from school. What's going on? Like, but yeah, it does. It's a lot of it is, just constantly thinking about ways to kind of avoid those certain junk food items, if you will. But there are plenty of ways to create fun activities around healthier food items. So instead of making, a little spider with a marshmallow, right? If you've ever seen like the marshmallow with the like pretzel sticks and the arms, you can do a banana, so like thinking of ways to kind of switch out some of those sweets items. But then at the same time, something that we talk about a lot with our classes is that, we have sweets, we have salty snacks or things like that. And it's okay. We don't, like we said earlier, we don't ever want to restrict a food. So really talking to your kids about the difference in foods, and you can use something like a go food versus a slow food, or an everyday food versus a sometimes food. But we know that those everyday foods, the foods that we see on the My Plate, those are foods that we can eat every single day because they help our body grow. They give us the nutrients that our body needs. Where those sometimes, or those slow foods, they're okay to eat every now and then, but they don't help my body grow the same way that those other foods do. So we just don't need them in our diet the same way that we need fruits and vegetables or grains, and however you want to frame it. But really, the more you talk to them about it, and it's so crazy, like the things that these kids pick up on that when I'm in the classrooms, they're learning so much about this. And it's such a hot topic that, they really do pick up on these things. And they can pick up on good and bad, right? So they might, really say, oh, well, you're not supposed to ever have McDonald's. Well, you know what? Sometimes we might have McDonald's, and that's okay, as long as we know that there are foods that we can eat, maybe throughout the day if we're having our McDonald's at night, so that we're getting, those nutrients we need elsewhere. So it's just a lot of it is kind of framing for your own mindset, as well as, as your kids are growing and learning. And yeah, if I need to expand more on that later, please let me know. The last one here, be a good role model. So when we think about us as adults, or even older siblings, they pick up on everything that they see us do, their older siblings do. And so if they see that mom isn't eating broccoli, well, and you've served broccoli on their plate, well, they're not going to eat the broccoli if you're not eating it. So sometimes, even if we don't like it, it is good to model that behavior. If you're expecting your child to eat something and you're not eating it, then they might not really be willing to. And that's something that we have to understand. And the same thing is true with the junk food. And so once again, if they, it's okay every now and then, but if they see us eating it all the time, and we're saying, no, you can't have this, they're going to want it too. So just keeping that in mind. And as older siblings, you can talk to them about, helping to model that behavior too. And that can be a challenge with some of our older ones too, but still something fun to think about. Okay, so when we come back to our make eating positive here, anybody have any thoughts on ways we can say, I don't like it? And you can type them in the chat.
As people are typing in the chat, or if they want to unmute, one thing that we've tried to start saying in my house is, it's not my favorite, as opposed to I don't like it. Somebody put in the chat, that's not for me. Yeah.
And yeah, it's not my favorite. That's one that I use quite often. And it is really cool because within the classrooms that I'm in, I really do, by the end of the school year, I start to see more and more kids using that language. And so if they hear it and it's, it's consistent, they really will start to, adapt to that, and avoiding those, ooh and gross and things like that when we think about talking about food. So yeah, it's not for me is another great one. And so if we look at some of these, we've got a few different levels, if you will. And so we have that not today, no, thank you, maybe next time. And so really, maybe next time and not today. I really like these even more than no thank you. Well, no thank you is nice and polite. Maybe next time and not today, that actually leaves room for a next time, right? So it's not definite. If I say no or no thank you, that might mean, I don't want it today, I don't want it tomorrow. But if we say maybe next time, not today, it at least, whether the kids realize it or not, helps leave that room for a future trying. It's not my favorite, it's not for me, I'm not crazy about it, I'm not a fan of it. Same thing. Those are all just ways of saying I don't like it, but they're much more, respectful and kind, and less likely to have a negative reaction from somebody that hears that if they did like that food. Finally, our two at the end, these are a little bit of a higher thinking level. I prefer, or I may like it better if. And this is where we want our kids to get, right? So if we can help give them the tools to actually communicate, because we know with preschool and toddlers, and that's a big frustration in general, is just learning how to communicate, and sharing what they're feeling is just such a hard thing for them in general. And so if we can do this with food, it can help us really alleviate some of the frustration that parents and kids might have around mealtime. And so, maybe you serve broccoli, and today you served broccoli cooked and they prefer it raw. Well, if they can tell you that, then that can actually help alleviate a lot of problems, right? So, this is also comes down to during meal times, talking about the foods in front of them, saying, oh, hey, today we had broccoli with ranch. Did you like it? Would you prefer it with cheese sauce? Whatever it is, but just something where you're helping them kind of realize what flavors they do like, what flavors they like better than others, etc. And so that second level of I prefer it this way, or I would like it better this way, can really help keep them from having some meltdowns at mealtime, and it might help save you some frustration too when you're serving meals.
For sure. What would you say to, I know that one thing that's common, probably not just in my household, is really liking a certain food for a long time and then very abruptly not liking the food anymore. So it'll be like, I've eaten peas with butter on them for, 10 days in a row. And now all of a sudden it's like, I don't like that anymore. We'll go through a phase of not liking that. Any tips for why that might be? Is it just that taste buds change or kids get sick of things, or?
And there is actually like a scientific name for that. And I, of course, can't think of the exact term, but that's common. And think about it, even from our own standpoint. I'm somebody that does a lot of meal prepping just because it's easy and convenient. So I eat the same thing over and over again for lunch most days. And by the time Friday hits, I no longer want that chili that I made, on Monday or whatever it might be. So, kids are no different. But yeah, they're comfortable in the foods that they know they like. And it takes them more time to open up to trying new foods, or even foods they know they like, but if they're just used to that one food, it's totally normal for them to do that. And as far as, combating with it, I honestly don't have like any specific tips.
Sure.
Just, the staying patient, seeing what else they might eat instead. And the thing that I see to kind of piggyback off of that is, the idea of, okay, I've served dinner. They ate, maybe a few bites here and there. We move on. 5 minutes later, Mom, I want a snack. And,
Yeah.
you're like, well, you didn't eat the actual meal I served. So,
Right.
and so that can be a tricky one too. And with that, what we try to do, one, set the plate aside, don't throw the food out, see if they'll come back around to it. But two, try to have some like reserve snack items. So like 2 or 3 options that are, on the healthier side, maybe some graham crackers, whatever, like a bowl of cereal, something that's not going to be super high in sugar before bed, right? Something that's not, going to be really high in flavor either, but, something that's still something they like.
Right.
Yogurt. And those are the three, when they say, Mom, I want a snack after dinner, and they didn't really eat their dinner, those are your options. Like, and that a lot of it really does come down to, us as parents, kind of sticking to our word. And those toddlers, they know how to push your buttons and break you down. I'm no
Absolutely.
different.
Right. The
But
snack
that's
after dinner. Oh,
yeah.
that's a rough one. There's a great question in the chat too. So what if I may like it better if we were just talking about, trying to get our kids to communicate like how they might like the food prepared differently to get them to try it. So it's, what if the I might like it better if is lots of salt? Is it better to give the veggies with like lots of salt or other things that might not be so healthy? I'm thinking like, some dressing or a lot of butter. Is that a better option, or is it better just not to have the veggies? This is more for like an older child.
And so, yeah, I think you have to kind of pick your battles at times and decide what is your end goal. If your end goal is to get them to eat some vegetables, then, if you have to serve it with ranch or, whatever it may be, extra salt, so be it. And then slowly, we want to try to maybe cut down on the salt over time, or try, instead of like just a regular ranch dip, you can try a yogurt based herb dip. And same thing. They're probably going to say, hey, Mom, I know this is different. A lot of times things I like to do, like, for instance, when we think about like brown rice and white rice. So like you can mix the two together. So you can make some brown rice, you can make some white rice, you can mix them together. You could do the same thing with dressing. You could do, whole fat ranch dressing with some low fat ranch dressing, mix it together and slowly, kind of wean it down to the low fat, or, whatever it may be. But that at least isn't such a harsh or drastic transition for our kids, because they pick up on those things. They're very observant, and they know when anything's a little bit different, they know. And so, slow changes, small changes over time are really the best way to do that, so that it doesn't, cause too much of pushback from them. And the end of the day, with yes, there is a recommended daily allowance for sodium or for salt. And when we think about salt, a lot of times, we're really trying to help the foundation, right? So salt with kids isn't as, crucial, but yes, by the time they reach adulthood, we want them to, be able to, limit the salt, at least some. But yeah, it's just kind of, you have to choose which one you're looking for. If they're eating lots of salt throughout their day and you're trying to make sure they don't have enough, or they don't have salt, then maybe instead of a vegetable, you're finding a fruit or something else that has a nutritious value in it that, will be kind of similar. On that note too, I think I lost my train of thought. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it back up. But yeah, just, small changes have a big effect. And sometimes you got to choose your battles. Okay, so if we look at some other tips here, and I think we've talked about a few of these now, but when you do have a new food, it can go a lot better if we make sure that we serve it alongside foods that we know are familiar or even favorable. So if you're introducing a new vegetable, serve it with their favorite food. If that's mac and cheese, and you're putting the peas next to the mac and cheese, at least they see something they like. If they see a whole plate of things they've never seen before, it's going to be very overwhelming. And the other thing with that too is it doesn't have to be a big amount. You can always serve more. So start small. If they eat a few bites or even just one bite, so be it. Starting small, and then you can add from there for sure. And that's my recommendation as well when we think about continuing to serve food. If you've served broccoli a few times and that they're really not eating it, even just one little piece, one little broccoli floret every time, that can be enough to at least give them the exposure. And that way you're not wasting food. Of course, sometimes we have to think about that. And so, if we're buying a whole bag of fresh broccoli, we need to make sure we can use that bag. So, a bag of frozen broccoli, or, a canned vegetable, it may be better while they're still learning to, be comfortable with that food. So it doesn't have to be, anything elaborate, but just those continual exposures are helpful. When we talked about this, but making sure that you're serving those foods in a variety of ways. So whether it's cooked versus raw, whether it's, with a sauce, uh, just trying a variety of ways can really help. Think about, for instance, something like chickpeas. So if I serve chickpeas, out of the can, or if I, make them myself, that's going to be very different than if I serve hummus. And hummus is made from chickpeas, but they taste different. They can still get a lot of great nutrition either way. And so, trying the variety of ways can help too. We know that kids, especially toddlers, they actually have a really good, they really know when they're full. And so as we grow, and especially because a lot of us have been taught to finish our entire plates, things like that, we kind of get out of touch with the idea of, my body is full, I should stop eating. But toddlers and preschoolers at that age, they really do have a true, okay, I'm full, I'm going to stop eating. And so if we see that our child one night doesn't eat, maybe only a few bites from their plate, and normally they're eating regularly, don't get too concerned. They may have had a big lunch. Things like that happen. It's nothing to get concerned over. Of course, if it's happening consistently to the point, and this is where, at the end of the day, as long as your child's growing, that's a good sign, right? If you come to a point where you don't think your child is growing, then that's something that you would talk with your pediatrician, or another healthcare professional who can help, come up with a specific plan for your child to make sure that they're developing appropriately and that they're getting everything they need. Whether that's some kind of supplement like, Pediasure or something like that. But if it's, every now and then that child isn't eating dinner, or, whatever meal it is, don't get too upset by it. And same thing, if they don't eat a broccoli or any kind of vegetable until they're 5 and they're still growing, like, no, it's not ideal, but as long as they're growing, like, they will be okay. And so we know that, picky eating comes in a variety of forms, and some, they will only stick to certain foods, and that is what it is. Some are willing to try, and that's great, and we want to give them those tools to help them become more comfortable with trying. We do want to try to still offer a variety of foods from all 5 food groups. And so if you know that one vegetable that your child likes is carrots, then, keep giving them carrots. They're getting great, they're getting great things from their carrots. Yes, we want them to have a variety, but at the end of the day, if they're getting something, and it's got, that nutritious value in it, it's going to be good for them. And you can keep giving it to them. Maybe alongside the carrots, you throw a few peas in there, every now and then, but, don't get too, too stressed out if they're not eating, every vegetable that you serve. A few more things here. I think we've said, serving in small portions can really be helpful. And having a routine. Kids do so well with routines. If they have that routine, they know, okay, dinner time is at whatever time it is, 6:30 every night, then they're going to be a little bit more likely to have, a successful meal. If it's sporadic, then that can cause a lot of stress for them. It can cause stress for you as well. And of course, if your children are going into school, or daycare settings, they're getting structure there. They're getting scheduled routines throughout the day. So they're used to it, and they'll adapt to that at home. Right now, I'm trying to reset with our bedtime routine because that's been a struggle lately. And so we had to pull out a checklist, and sometimes you have to reset. And so far, our girls have been really adapting to it well. And so, that structure can really help sometimes.
That's a great point. And it reminds me of one of the questions that was entered in registration was about for families who are sending their children to a daycare program or maybe a DCPS preschool program, and they've got a pickier eater on their hands. Is it better to send them with like a packed lunch of foods that they know their child is going to eat, or to kind of just send them and the school's going to be offering whatever is prepared for lunch and breakfast and sometimes supper at some schools, and let them choose from that what they like and what they don't like. I think a lot of times parents are worried, like, is it better to just know that they're getting some calories in there, or is it better to kind of put them into the situation and let them figure it out for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it really does. It comes down to, individual situations. So first off, definitely have those conversations with the teachers or the caregivers at daycare, and, ask them, okay, what's being served? A lot of times they'll send home a menu, um, and ask how are kids being served? Are they eating family style, for instance, or are they, all individually served with their plates already made? Family style dining is another really great tool, and this can be something that you all do at home. We are seeing more of it in both daycare and school settings, where children actually pass bowls around, and they have, appropriate sized serving spoons, and they're actually doing, the serving themselves. So they're learning those motor skills of, scooping the food, putting it on the plate. And yeah, it can be a little bit messy and takes, some getting used to. But family style dining has been a really, research has shown a lot of really great successes with it, especially for picky eaters, because kids are, kind of in charge of what's going on their plate. It also helps them learn, about food waste and things like that, not over serving themselves. And so you can ask, your daycare settings or your school settings, are they being served family style? Are they not? If they are being served family style dining, that would be one reason I would say, hey, maybe try the school lunch over the packed lunch. Either one is totally fine, and it's whatever your family and yourself are most comfortable with. But I mean, I see the school lunches that the kids are getting, and I really am very impressed with the lunches that I'm seeing within DCPS. And I love what my girls get at the school, because it's things that I might not serve. And so they are once again being exposed to new kinds of foods or different flavors. But they're also doing a great job of making sure that, it's the right, they're cutting the food correctly so that, there's not going to be any choking hazards. And not saying that us as parents aren't doing that too, but there's a lot of great things that you really can get from those school served lunches that are definitely worth at least, looking into before saying I'm only going to pack lunch or my child's only going to eat food from home. Another thing we think about is our beverages. And so on my plate, we don't necessarily have a lot of space on there for the drinks themselves, other than the dairy food group with milk. And of course, we can have the 100% fruit juice. But when we think about sodas or other sugary beverages like lemonade, sweet teas, of course, things like that, even the juice is at a high amount, right? Kids can really fill up on those. And so we want to be mindful. Of course, we want to make sure that they're getting enough fluids, they're getting hydrated throughout the day. But if they can stick to water for most of their day, and then, maybe a glass of milk at lunch or at dinner, things like that, that's totally fine too. But that's one way to just help make sure that they're getting the foods, they're eating the foods that are being served at dinner and not filling up on those beverages. And another thing I do want to mention with the juice, I know that's a big challenge for me at home. When we think about fruit juice, we do want to make sure that it's 100% fruit juice, so that it's coming, from that apple or from that orange or whatever juice you're buying, and not from concentrate or not added sugars in there. For instance, if I think about something like a fruit punch or even like a fruit drink, there's plenty of, things that we're adding in sugar now and we're not necessarily getting the nutrients from the fruit itself. So just make sure if you are buying juice, that you're buying 100% juice. And same thing goes if you're buying like canned fruits, find them in 100% juice instead of syrup. What I like to do with my juice is cut it with water. So anytime I'm serving juice in my house, I fill the cup with about halfway with water, and then I finish it with the juice. And same thing if your child isn't used to that, it'll take some time. But if you can do that, that at least dilutes it so we know it's not as high in sugar. They're still getting some of the nutrients from the juice. But ultimately, we know that there's more benefits of from eating a whole apple or a whole fruit over a juice, because there's going to be more fiber in those whole fruits than there will be in the juice itself.
Great. There's a question in the chat that what if your kid likes to just drink milk all day?
Yeah, milk is great.
It's familiar.
So first and foremost, depending on the age of your child, at the age of 2, after that child turns 2, they can start switching to 1% or even skim milk or fat-free milk. So after the age of 2, we no longer need to be serving whole milk. And of course, that will cut down on some of the calories and overall fat. And the recommended allowance for milk is really going to be that 2.5 to 3 cups, and that's for all dairy. And yeah, milk is great, but we do know at a certain point, like there shouldn't be, really too much more past that allowance. But if they like milk, at least they're getting great nutrients from it. And like I said, just trying to switch to that 1% or that skim milk can be helpful too if they're eating or they're drinking large amounts. And same thing, if you're trying to switch from that whole milk to 2 or to 1%, don't go straight from the whole milk to the skim milk. Slowly, you can mix them. So you can go whole milk mixed with 2%, and then, just 2%. And then 2% mixed with 1%, and then just 1%. So slowly help them adjust to that that difference. And that can go for you as an adult, if you're somebody that still enjoys 1% whole milk or 2% milk. That's a good easy way to slowly get more used to the lower fat milks. And when we come to our last point, definitely make sure that you are including your child in the cooking process. This, doesn't have to be every night, because I know it can be messy. But if you're making tacos, your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, they can rip up some lettuce with their fingers. They can set the table. They can, potentially, depending on, they might be able to pour some drinks or, help load the dishwasher. And we're going to share a list of activities that kids can help with in the kitchen, depending on their age. But those are really great ways. If your child ripped up that lettuce for that salad, they might actually eat the salad because they actually made it. And this also goes, if they have a chance, if you have space for a herb garden, or even a small plant that you can grow something in, if they get to watch that plant grow and they get to water that plant every day, and then when they finally get to pick those first basil leaves or that first tomato, they're going to be more likely to want to eat it because they helped make that, they helped grow that plant. So gardening and cooking can really be powerful when it comes to getting to actually try some of those foods. And the same thing is true if they come into the grocery store with you, which I know can be very chaotic, but it's good every now and then to let them help you pick foods out. Typically, I know when we go to the grocery store, I always come home with at least 5 things that I was not planning to buy because they found whatever it is they found. But those are great ways to help get them more excited about trying new things. Okay, so to recap us, it's totally normal for kids to reject foods they've never tried, or even foods that they think they don't like. Small portions can have great benefits. Serve them one new food at a time. Don't overwhelm them with too many new foods at once. If you expect them to eat something, show them that you're gonna eat that same food, or that siblings are eating it with them too. Be patient, new foods take time. We always want to make sure we get those 5 food groups. So offer a wide range of foods. And, that goes for, different fruits and vegetables. They might find one they really like. That's great. Keep serving the ones they like, add in a few new ones here and there. We want to try to avoid, requiring kids to eat or finish their plate. And we want to try to avoid, identifying food as bad or forbidden. And so those are kind of our takeaways. I will, a minute before we get here, I will just open it up to you all for questions. And then I'll talk about our newsletter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I dropped some links in the chat, but for everybody on, please feel free to enter questions that you have in the chat or unmute yourself to ask. One of the questions that I could definitely empathize with that was entered in registration was about the idea of dessert after dinner. And so what if you serve dinner and your child barely eats anything of the healthier foods that you've served? Do you withhold dessert, or should they be allowed to have dessert anyway, because we don't want it to be a punishment?
And that it's so tricky. And a lot of it does just come down to how you're framing it. So if same thing, like if they know that they're supposed to get dessert, we don't want to punish by saying, no, you can't have it. But we do want to try to, really encourage those eating the foods that are being served first. And if that means serving some kind of sweet food with dinner or with meals, rather than, as okay, now we're going to have dessert. So, that could be something like a yogurt. And of course, we still want to make sure we're finding like quality yogurts that aren't super high in sugar. But if that's their dessert, then, it's okay. Of course, if it has some sugar, same thing. If trying serving fruit as a dessert option instead of, just the ice cream or whatever it may be. Or even, putting some fruit on the ice cream or in the yogurt, can be a way that at least, they're getting some nutrients from the toppings and things like that. But, yeah, it really just comes down to, the framing that you have in your household. And if that's something that's happening every night where they're not eating dinner and then they're still getting dessert, then that might be, time to kind of reset and think about ways to get them more excited about trying food first.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that came up in registration was around, how do you know if your child is just a typical picky eater, a picky toddler, a picky preschooler, or whether there might be something else going on? Maybe they have a real food aversion, or there's something about the texture. Maybe there's a sensory issue or an allergy, or something isn't quite right. Are there any tips that you have about how to tell what's typical and maybe what requires some further investigation?
For sure. So I think first and foremost, always, talk with your healthcare professionals. So talk with your pediatrician. They may be able to recommend you to a registered dietitian, which is great. But sometimes it can be hard to get those referrals. So I know that's frustrating at times, but truly, take note of the behaviors you're seeing, especially if you have a doctor's appointment coming up. Make sure you're logging some of the behaviors that your child is exhibiting, and also making sure, same thing with development. So as I said earlier, we do want to make sure that our kids are growing and they're developing appropriately. So those are the main points to take note of. And then of course, yes, if you're starting to notice that there's certain foods that are causing certain reactions, definitely, you can keep a food journal or just jot down, okay, he had, milk today and it had this effect. Things like that can always be good to just have ready, that you can share with your pediatrician so that they can help you navigate. But yeah, it can be a really stressful time trying to determine, okay, is something wrong? Or is this normal behavior? And that first indicator is going to be, their growth and development. So, making sure they're growing, working with your pediatrician. Those are my main recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as we are. Okay, let's see. Do we need to do something about picky eating? We're also dealing with sleep battles. So this seems like it'll sort itself out. Am I too optimistic?
I'm happy to, yeah, I don't know if I am being too optimistic, but do I really need to do something about this? Seems like, I don't know, he's getting some calories, he is growing, but we have resorted to using whey protein, and I'm curious what you think of that in our whole milk, because it's more calories, so I want him to have it.
So yeah, I think first and foremost, talk to your pediatrician. If that's something that your pediatrician has recommended, then follow that for sure. Don't take anything I say and be like, well, somebody told me. If your pediatrician said it, do it. And then yeah, if that's something that you're doing on your own, definitely talk to your pediatrician. Make sure that they can help identify maybe those appropriate supplements for your child. But yeah, you're right. Do we really need to do something about it? If your child is growing and you're not stressed about it, then no, like you said, a lot of times they will, it kind of will just resolve itself. If you're stressed by it, if there's frustration at mealtime, then that's when, if you want to take action to try to alleviate some of that frustration, by all means do it. But yeah, like you said, a lot of these things, it's just this age group. They do typically start to, come out of it. And yes, some kids, even once we reach, adolescence, they still have a bit of that picky eating, and that's fine too. But yeah, as long as they're growing and developing, that's our main goal, right?
Let's see. All right. Is my screen sharing for you all now with the
Yes.
QR code? Excellent. All right. Miranda, thank you so much. This session has been really helpful, and I so appreciate, and I know everybody on the call does too, just all of the ideas that you had and really concrete examples of things that we can all start implementing, replacement phrases. And I'm really excited about the parent newsletter as well. And so as folks are entering any very last questions that they have into the chat, I just wanted to make sure that you could see the QR code that's up here to take our survey. We really appreciate your feedback about the session. It helps to inform the content of future sessions that we offer. And Miranda and her team have generously donated some materials that are going to be they're going to be raffled off, a reward for taking the survey. So there's some cool stuff in there. We usually do a bundle of children's books, and we'll also have some materials from the SNAP-Ed team as well. Right. Looks like the chat's gone pretty quiet.
Sorry, I see one more.
Oh, go for it.
So I'll just, as far as the protein goes, I think whey protein is a great option. With any supplement, always, you always want to read the ingredients in there, especially if there's any ones that, you can't pronounce or look really big and scientific, definitely do your research on them. And then just check, if it's a high in added sugar or not. So those are the main things to think about with supplements in general. But yeah, whey protein is a good source of protein, and definitely is great for helping with development.
Okay, so you're not worried about kidney failure or anything from it?
I wouldn't be,
Okay.
but definitely talk with your pediatrician. as long as they're comfortable with it, then you should be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your questions.
Absolutely. All right. And if anybody has additional questions that you think of when you leave the session, please feel free to reach out. You can send us an email or connect with us at readyforprek.org, and we'll definitely reach out. And Miranda has shared a number of really awesome resources that we will send out in our next Ready for Pre-K newsletter for you all, as well as a copy of the deck that we used for tonight. So thank you so much for your time and expertise, Miranda. Thanks everyone for joining on this gorgeous evening, and we'll see you next time.